Watching News at Prime. Well, let's get into this conversation now. President Cyril Ramaphosa will tomorrow outline the government's plans for the 7th administration during the opening of Parliament. Let's speak now to Saftu General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi on what the Federation expects from the Government of National Unity. Mr. Vavi, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. I'd like to start with the opening of Parliament and the specific day chosen here. It is going to be on International Nelson Mandela Day, and it coincides with the late statesman's birthday. That kind of symbolism, what do you make of that? Was it a right or a specific touch by, I suppose, Parliament working in unison with the head of state, who is President Ramaphosa?
Well, firstly, happy birthday to Tata Nelson Mandela. Some of us do recognize the immense contribution that he made, the sacrifices that he put, and the pains, the tribulations, and the excellent leadership that he provided to our country, so that we can find ourselves on the 27th of April with lesser bloodshed than what we could have endured if he didn't provide the leadership. Notwithstanding that, we do recognize that that leadership didn't save nearly 20,000 of our people who died in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng mainly, out of a strife that we later learned was being engineered by the first force, the apartheid regime itself. So Nelson Mandela will always have a very special place in the millions of our people, notwithstanding the criticisms, a lot of it being fair, but we do recognize him as the icon of the struggle for freedom and democracy in South Africa. Yeah. Salutations to him and the generations of other leaders before him and those that he led together that struggle for liberation. Now, the NGU, or Government of National Unity, GNU, and the Nelson Mandela moment of the 10th of May in 1994 is clearly not the same circumstances. Nelson Mandela was very conscious in driving unity between black people and white people in our country. And he invited the National Party, the former oppressors, to form part of the Government of National Unity. And for 2 or 3 years, that seemed to be working. Eventually, it collapsed. It collapsed with the National Party. But it was a much more stronger hand of Nelson Mandela and that of the ANC that was inviting smaller parties to form part of the Government National Unity. Yeah. Next, now, where we are, it's not the same circumstances. The ANC has been tremendously weakened because of its own goals. It has dropped 17% from the previous elections. It's now sitting at 40%. It is initiating the so-called Government of National Unity, not out of strength, but out of weakness. It doesn't have a choice but to form coalitions with political parties that have vowed to devour it politically, but all of them have now accepted the need to form a government. They call it a Government of National Unity, but we all know that this is not a Government of National Unity. It's a grand coalition between the ANC and the parties that it has invited that have agreed to a set of principles. Now, this is what makes tomorrow more interesting, in particular, from the working class point of view. Yeah. For 30 years, we have argued that even though we made some interesting, important gains after 1994, the Constitution, an array of labor law legislation that is progressive, that changed the face of the South African apartheid labor market to make it one that is based on protection of rights of workers. But tomorrow is seemed to be a new ball game. The main parties to this government of national unity or grand coalition are the ANC that have over a period of time been shifting more towards the center right, and the Democratic Alliance, a undoubtedly pro-business, big business shop squad. And we fear that tomorrow may be a beginning of what we feared as to be a doomsday for the poor and the working class. But nevertheless, we have chosen to continue to advance the interest of workers, persecute the struggle that we believe is just. So tomorrow, what we'll be looking for, we will be looking at the issue of jobs. In the context of this much talked about lekgotla of cabinet, we want to hear what did they decide to do about the main and the principal problem number one of South Africa.
Yeah.
Youth unemployment sitting at 8.7 million and nearly 13 million South Africans unemployed, with an unemployment rate at their world-breaking levels at 42%. What is their plan? What are they going to do? Are they going to continue with what have dismally failed the poor and the marginalized black majority already, or will they accept the need to change?
Yeah.
The second thing we'll be looking at is whether they will address the crisis of housing in all our big metropolitans, such as Johannesburg. Will they take steps to ensure that there's no more fires in the Johannesburg city? Will they address the infrastructure in the rural areas? Will they address ESCOM finally and put any fear of load shedding coming back in disguise to other means, as it is happening in the smaller towns already? Will they introduce a basic income grant as an immediate step to alleviate devastating levels of poverty amongst our people already? So we're looking at those 5 priorities as Saftu.
Let's talk about the creation of jobs, or should we say economic growth. The sectors that you think need closer attention, or should we say urgent attention, so that there can immediately be a reversal of the unemployment figures that we see time and time again. Which sectors of the economy need closer and immediate attention by this government, working in partnership with the private sector, by the way?
We want a total overhauling of the economy as a whole. The whole structure must be turned upside down. The whole reliance on mining, heavy chemicals, and finance capital to drive economic growth have proven that it is not working. What we have been demanding is that government must use the remaining mineral wealth in our land that makes us to be the 5th wealthiest nation in the world, according to Citibank and according to the PwC. We want us to use that advantage, use our platinum, our chrome, use our coal more effectively, use our other minerals, beneficiate them in South Africa, create secondary industries in South Africa, stop importing jobs, or stop exporting jobs rather, to India and China, and use the benefit of the fact that we are so endowed with minerals here, build those industries in South Africa, stop the bleeding or the hemorrhaging in the manufacturing sector. You know that we have lost 50% of our manufacturing capacity between 1994 and to date. If the government can tell the country tomorrow that we have learned that the export-based economy, we have learned this of making South Africa a neo-colonial economy where we're just digging the minerals and sending them raw to China, India, and other former colonial master headquarters will now stop. We want to beneficiate, and we're starting a process of working and revamping our tax system so that we can reward the mining companies that are going to beneficiate, and we're going to be punishing those that wants to send the minerals raw elsewhere in the world. So that will be a very important step and start if the president was to go to lead us into that direction tomorrow.
Talking about protecting jobs, the new Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Pak Stau, he is in Washington this week, and it's all in an effort to try and ensure that AGOA is not taken away from South Africa. How important are those discussions taking place there? And if they don't succeed, the likely impact on jobs here?
There is firstly, let's condemn, and I think we must be unequivocal in condemning the United States bully tactics. They are clearly using their economic muscle now to muzzle South Africa, to punish it for standing in solidarity with the victims of genocide that is being perpetrated by one of the most important allies of the American government, the apartheid regime of Israel. We condemn that the American regime continues to wants to be the policeman of the world, as Tata Nelson Mandela put it, whilst they themselves are totally oblivious to the suffering that the people of Palestine are going through. Having said that, obviously we will support the efforts by the minister and the government to try and speak to the government and to the parliamentarians of the United States to stop bullying the world and to stop bullying South Africa, to drop this whole idea of punishing South Africa for the stance it have taken to take Israel to the International Court of Justice. That's what we are being punished here for. We want to address any sentiment. We want a positive sentiment about South Africa. We live with the reality of a capitalist world and a capitalist South Africa in which sentiments are important. We don't want negative sentiments. Any decision by the Senate in the United States to review the relationship between South Africa and the United States send a signal that says to the investors, go slow, be careful, because this country is going to be in our black books very, very soon. Don't do business with it. And that sentiment can be quite be drastic in the interest of South Africa, which is desperate for investments to flow not just to South Africa, but to our region and to our continent.
Yeah.
So we do support that. But at the same time, we don't want to exaggerate the importance of AGOA. As far as we have been told, South Africa benefit to the tune of about 60 billion rands. United States is not the biggest trading partner of South Africa. China is now, and Europe has always been traditionally the biggest trading partner of South Africa. At least the European Union have not taken a position that says we must be punished for standing firm next to the people of Israel who are suffering under the heavy boots of the Israeli government that is ensuring that the whole nation is extinct, is wiped out of the face of the nation, and that in future there will be not even a talk of the compromise of a two-stage solution, because there will be no other state to talk about. Everybody would have been driven either to exile or they would have been killed, as they are being killed left, right, and center as we speak.
Yeah. Mr. Vavi, I'd like for us to close this conversation on a political note, and this is something that I think you touched on. when we began the conversation. So we're going to take a break. When we return, we'll close the conversation with Zwelinzima Vavi. We'll touch on the politics that will likely be at play here over the next 5 years as far as the government of national unity is concerned. You're watching News at Prime. If you're just joining us, you find us at the tail end of a conversation with the General Secretary of Saftu, Zwelinzima Vavi. We're talking about the expectations at the opening of Parliament. President Cyril Ramaphosa will address both houses as head of state. Let's continue the conversation now with Zwelinzima Vavi. Mr. Vavi, let's talk a little bit of politics now. We know from the experiences of a government that was run by the ANC only over the last 30 years that a minister and a deputy minister can often clash at times because of petty politics. And I'll remind you of something that we were reminded about by Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana in his opinion piece in News 24 today, when he talks about the personality factor. He reminds us that Nathi Mthethwa, as police minister, never got along with his deputy, Fikile Mbalula, because Mbalula felt that he was senior to Nathi Mthethwa. And at some point, there had to be the reshuffling so that Fikile Mbalula could be given a full ministry. I suspect he may contest that, but those are not my words. Those are Professor Ndletyana's words. The reason I'm pointing this out is that you have ministers now that come from the DA, and some of them are deputized by ANC people who were full ministers in that role. Case in point, Dean McPherson and Sihle Zikalala. The personality factor, how do you think this is going to be managed in this government of national unity?
It's going to be very difficult. Just on a lighter note, I saw one former minister now sitting as a deputy minister, looking more like he has just been told that his wife has passed away. It's difficult. And you can imagine if things can be difficult within a party, how much more between parties that do not share the same history, that are enemies to one another politically, that have vowed to destroy one another on the eve of or in the run-up to these elections, that are now being forced by circumstances of no clear winner to work together. It's going to be very difficult, and that's what we're going to be watching tomorrow. I'm sure everyone will be looking at the lips of the president, the eyes, the face, and the posture that is going to be taking as he's reporting on what the lekgotla have decided to do. So we're going to get a first indication as to where the government is going to on a range of issues.
Yeah.
And secondly, it's going to be dynamic because there will be some dynamism. Sometimes clashes between the players do guarantee some form of a movement forward. There will be some interesting dynamics between a minister whose deputy is from another party, accounting to a chairperson of a portfolio committee in parliament who do not belong to any of the parties that are in government. And that belongs to a totally different party. For example, Songezo Zibi is now the chairperson of that all-important committee. We want to see how he's going to be managing that, because at least South Africa have had a good spell of those portfolio committee chairpersons from different minority parties playing a critical role in holding the executive accountable. Yeah. But we want to see that accountability across the board. Hopefully, all of the chairpersons of this portfolio committee, whether they are coming from any of those political parties, will hold the fort on behalf of ordinary people, will hold the executive truly accountable. This may be just maybe a possibility coming out of the government of national unity, that the contradictions between the minister, the deputy minister, the minister, the president, the different political parties and their setup, as well as how they relate to the portfolio committees, who are also a mirror of how these political parties have decided to share power at that level, and how, therefore, they're going to have to manage the issue of accountability.
Yeah.
I suspect that we may see an improved levels of accountability of the executive to parliament. I think we may see the history of ya pass, ya mem, ya se, being put firmly on the past, and these chairpersons will step forward to saying, we are not your rubber stamps, we're going to hold you accountable, and we are not going to allow you to do things or to come and say nothing to Parliament, as some of you have done before.
Yeah. Well, at government and indeed at parliamentary level, what you are suggesting is probably something that South Africans are hoping for: improved accountability that will likely translate to better services for people on the ground in terms of the use of government resources for the purposes that they are intended for. But let me conclude on this note, and very briefly, if you can. So let's now talk the politics within the ANC. A very, very interesting dynamic is unfolding there. This week, Solly Mapaila, the SACP General Secretary, addressing at a Nehau political school, he talks about it would be better to be irritated by the EFF in cabinet as opposed to a neoliberal political party such as the Democratic Alliance. Now, I ask this evening the Veterans League Deputy Leader, Mavuso Msimang, what he makes of this statement from Solly Mapaila. And he says, you know, the conversation about left, right, is neither here nor there. I'm paraphrasing him. What we need for this country to work is a government that is going to deliver services to people, because already they have sounded a warning shot to the ANC to say, you are soon to get out of power if you don't do things the way that we want you to. I'm asking you a simple question as to, are we likely to see a split in the ANC, particularly the alliance partners, because there does seem to be this complaint that we had been saying for the longest time, let's reconfigure, and what today reconfiguration has been explained to be is that let's co-govern. But today, you're forced to co-govern with the enemy, as they put it. Do we think the ANC is at a crossroads if you pull it together in terms of its alliance partners?
Well, I have a huge respect for Dade Mavuso Msimang. He's one of the most upright, truth-speaking person of high level of integrity. But I disagree with him that we must put the ideology in the dustbin, whilst that itself is an ideological statement. There's nothing that is not political and not ideological. Everything we do, including the very politics of the government of national unity as between the ANC and the DA, is a political statement to advance a particular ideological perspective. We come from a perspective as Saftu that says that there's hardly any difference at the ideological level between the ANC and the Democratic Alliance. If you look at their big policy statements, the the NDP, there's no difference. NUMSA have done a thorough job to just look at what was in the DA, ANC, and how that is converging in the NDP as a joint policy of the two parties. Right. So this idea that including exaggeration by the COSATU and SACP leadership, that there is a left-leaning revolutionary party, the ANC, that is now getting into bed with this right wing, is not true. These are largely more center-right political parties who agree about the basic concepts of what must happen in the economy together. But of course, the the DA is on the extreme of that. We do recognize that.
I'm sorry to cut you short. Politics can be very interesting at times, but time is against us. I want to thank you very much for your time.